Wonderful. Hi, thank you all for being here. A quick visual description. I am a small white non-binary person with short red curly hair, black frame glasses, and a black shirt. I will be performing some poems on the topics of disability and sex work and speaking a bit about how the two are interconnected. For now, I want to start at the beginning. So my first experiences realizing that I was disabled were years before I knew that I was physically disabled. As a teenager, I struggled with my mental health a lot, including a couple hospitalizations. And so these first couple poems are older poems that speak to some of my mental health issues, in which my depression and my anxiety get together to play a game of the floor is lava. My depression is stuck in bed. My anxiety is hiding under the sheets, and I need to pee and eat and shower and brush my teeth and whatever else it is mentally stable people are able to do with their time. However, my mind keeps registering the floor as lava, and there is nothing but flame between me and the door. My anxiety reminds me moving will only hurt. My depression knows smothering something with a blanket is a good way to put out a fire and digs further under the covers. I try to escape them, dangle my feet off the edge of my bed only to feel the heat of the ground on my soles. I do not want to play anymore. If there's one thing I learned about growing up, it's that games are not fun anymore. We traded in board games for mind games, losing the ability to win. How did we never realize that if the floor is lava, the world around us is burning? This next poem is about dialectical behavior therapy, aka DBT, a form of therapy designed to help people living with personality disorders. So inevitably, when I was 15, I got sent to group therapy. Now, I'm not saying that I enjoyed group therapy. It was still group therapy. I'm just saying it was the one place I could go every week and be myself and not want to die. These messy adolescents, just as unstable as I was, every goodbye as fierce as the next, because we didn't know who would survive till next week. But on the weekends, we'd have sleepovers, just like I always dreamed, meaning they were complete with games of truth or dare and spin the bottle, odd couples sneaking off to explore a body like their own for the first time, to have their body treated like a body for the first time. I remember being surprised as she took off my shirt, and I did not want to hide my scars, wanted her to see more of me. Us, tender, broken hearts, desperate not to break any further, careful not to hurt anyone else. So this next poem speaks to some of the similarities between the feeling of anxiety and the feeling of excitement. This is something I've talked a lot about in therapy, how the two feelings are so similar that I can have a hard time sometimes feeling excited about things because I interpret that excitement as anxiety. So I wrote an ode to that because one of my mentors encourages me to write odes about things that are seen as negative or bad, which I think is like a beautiful exercise, trying to find gratitude for the things that you maybe don't like. So this is ode to the stirring in my stomach. Sometimes you are butterfly, beautifully fluttering between flowers. Other times you are moths, anxiously swarming, trying to find a light in the darkness. Regardless, you are always flying, always learning, asking, warning, letting me know that something is different here, that my attention is needed here. You know me better than I know myself. You excavator of excitement. You purveyor of panic attacks. You were the first sign of my queerness. Before I knew the taste of her bubblegum lip gloss, you were there, gently warning. You were the first sign of my anxiety. Before I knew the taste of Ativan stuck in throat, you were there, gently warning. I'm sorry for ignoring you, pushing you down, smoking you away. Thank you for always coming back. Thank you for all of your wisdom. This next poem has two parts, and it speaks to the experience of learning more about myself and my identities. Part one. There wasn't one particular moment in time in which I realized I was disabled. It was years of misunderstood signals, convincing myself the smoke detectors blaring in my brain were false alarms, that I wasn't actually on fire. It was years of ignoring sensations and inventing excuses as disassociation disconnected me from my body. But there was the moment I first questioned why the pills prescribed by my doctors weren't making me feel any better, then forced myself to push past the pain, swore I would recover soon. There was the moment I first said the words out loud, staring at an empty disability application, volunteers smudging hospital records as I realized I wouldn't be getting better anytime soon. There was the moment sitting on the floor of an unpacked basement suite when a friend first gave me an informal diagnosis, bent their thumb backwards till it touched their wrist, and asked if I could do the same. I saw my disability mirrored back at me, knew I wasn't alone in my questioning, found community in people who didn't care that I didn't have all the diagnoses, people who answered my questions years before the doctors could. There were all the moments a doctor gave me a new diagnosis: anxiety, arthritis, ARFID, BPD, TMJ, HSD. I have collected disorders like empty pill bottles. I keep telling myself I'll use them in an art project someday, but for now, they just look like clutter. There will always be parts of me left undiagnosed, symptoms I don't know how to describe, but I can use the word disabled to encompass the complexity of my existence, a single word that shifts and grows as I do. There wasn't one particular moment in time in which I realized I was disabled. I didn't wake up one morning with the words to describe the ways my body rebels against itself. It was years of growing so accustomed to pain, I didn't realize it was there. Years of changes so slow and subtle, they were easy to ignore. So if this poem is one of those moments, if you catch a glimpse of yourself reflected back in the mirror of these words, know that it's okay if this is a moment you ignore. There will be many more. There is wisdom in your uncertainty, in the symptoms you don't know how to describe, in the parts of you left unspoken. Every unanswered question is still a question. Every forgotten moment is still a moment. Part two. There wasn't one particular moment in time in which I realized I was queer. It was years of misunderstood signals. Butterflies I kept telling myself were moths, waiting to chew away at the fabric of my closeted clothes. It was years of ignoring intentions and inventing feelings, calling any boy who paid attention to me attractive. But there was the moment I first questioned why Rachel's buzz cut and nose ring caught my eye, then forced myself to forget my fascination, not yet ready to recognize this as romantic. There was the moment I first said the words out loud, whispered quietly in a high school hallway, cupped hand covering my mouth to her ear, afraid the words would escape us, afraid I was actually mistaken. There was the moment sitting on the roof of the Rito Center when a friend first asked my pronouns and told me they weren't sure what theirs were either. I saw my queerness mirrored back at me, knew I wasn't alone in my questioning, found community in people who didn't care about the uncertainties of my identity, people who listened to my questions without judging me for not having the answers. There were all the moments I came out as a new identity. I've been bisexual, lesbian, asexual, agender, genderqueer, gender fluid. I have collected labels like lapel pins, piling up on my dresser, unsure of which one to wear today. There will always be parts of my identity left unspoken, feelings I don't know how to describe, that I can use the word queer to encompass the complexity of my existence. A single word that shifts and grows as I do. There wasn't one particular moment in time in which I realized I was queer. I didn't wake up one morning with the words to describe my attraction to girls or the fact that I'm not one. It was years of growing so accustomed to yearning, I didn't realize it was there. Years of feeling so soft and subtle, they were easy to ignore. So if this poem is one of those moments, if you catch a glimpse of yourself reflected back in the mirror of these words, know that it's okay if this is a moment you ignore. There will be many more. There is wisdom in your uncertainty, in the feelings you don't know how to describe, in the parts of you left unspoken. Every unanswered question is still a question. Every forgotten moment is still a moment. So that poem was inspired by the similarities in my journeys towards discovering my disabled and queer identities. Both were heavily influenced by being in community and having friends who felt similarly and could help me figure things out or help me feel not okay about not being able to figure things out. There's so many questions and so few answers, and sometimes the answers that you do get create more questions, and there's so much, for me at least, that shifts and changes and grows that then also has made me unsure of whether I can or should claim certain labels or identities or diagnoses, um, especially because some diagnoses are really difficult to get, and there's a lot of stigma around self-diagnosis, unfortunately. And this next poem kind of speaks to the difficulties that could sometimes happen when seeking diagnoses, as well as just having more questions than answers. My doctor asks me if anyone in my immediate family meets the criteria for hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos. Immediately, I think of my mother, how she lived her life underdiagnosed. My mother found out she had borderline personality disorder the day we found out I have borderline personality disorder. Listened to my psychiatrist explaining the symptoms, threw her hands up in the air on the car ride home, telling me she could finally make sense of her life. I think of the skin condition I inherited from her, hidradenitis suppurativa, boils bubbling on skin, immune systems attacking healthy cells, thinking they are in danger. I think of how she always felt like she was in danger, and how I inherited those anxieties, paranoia proliferating as the panic sinks in. I wonder what it would have looked like if I had learned the words for this illness sooner, if I had learned to say hypermobile instead of double jointed, if I had figured out the failing of my connective tissue back when she was still alive. I ask my father what he remembers, and he picks up pieces of distant memories from decades ago and hands them to me like maybes, like pages that have fallen out of my mother's diary, but I am missing all the context, have no way to connect the dots. So I tell the doctor, not that I know of, and walk away from the appointment with more questions than answers. So part of why I wanted to have this virtual open mic be part of my gallery exhibition, and the main reason why some friends and I created Under the Table, a monthly open mic series that's helping run this show tonight, and runs half virtually and half in person masked shows, is because it's very important to me to create COVID safer performance spaces. I've had to leave most of the performance spaces I called home and thought were my community because of the nature of this ongoing pandemic and the ableism of people being over it without it actually being over. And so this next poem talks a little bit about that. My friend brings me a dozen pops, drops them off outside my apartment. I say thank you through the safety of a closed door. The COVID test comes back negative. I get one day to celebrate before finding out I have strep throat instead, a different workplace hazard. Sucking on the popsicles soothes my sore throat, but my swollen esophagus still hurts when I swallow. I wish I didn't need to suck or swallow. I wish that work was safer. I dream of a world where I'm protected, where the world doesn't rush to return to normal and people want to wear masks and people want to wear condoms. I wish the world was a bar where I didn't have to watch my drink, but instead it is a crowded bus packed full of maskless creeps touching the small of my back. My driving instructor says I'm really good at keeping an eye on the rearview mirror, double checking my blind spot, changing lanes when the car behind me keeps tailgating. I tell her being aware of my surroundings is how I survive. Keeping an eye on my drink, double checking the condom is still in place, changing clinics after the maskless doctor keeps coughing in my face. I leave the doctor's office. I leave the crowded bus. I leave the client's hotel. I leave the movie theater. I leave the karaoke bar. I leave the birthday party. I leave the poetry slam. I leave the community. And suddenly, I am alone in my apartment, saying fuck you as the world goes on without me, staring at the back of a closed door that isn't safe to open. So writing about disability means that I write a lot about COVID, and also that I write a lot about being a sex worker. A lot of the sex workers I know are disabled, and that isn't a coincidence. Sex work is one of the only jobs that is accessible to me. And I know that rings true to a lot of other folks as well. The flexibility in scheduling means that I can work around medical appointments and flare-ups, and I can work less hours, letting my body and brain get the rest they need to maintain sort of, base level functioning. And being paid in cash means that my income never impacts my disability payments. I believe strongly that disability and sex work are inherently connected, and this next poem speaks to that a little bit. My jaw specialist tells me I shouldn't be giving blowjobs. Says the repetitive motion will only aggravate my arthritis. I don't tell her that I don't have that luxury. That I wish they were called blow hobbies and not blow jobs, but this is the only job I am able to maintain. At 18, I got fired from a vape lounge for having too many bathroom breakdowns, silently sobbing into my sleeve, eyes rubbed raw with toilet paper. Ever since, I survived by unbuckling belt loops, kneeling in supplication, swallowing my pride. The short work hours keep the panic attacks to the privacy of my bedroom, but now it is my body's turn to rebel. I give a client a blowjob and my jaw screams at me like the kettle on my stove demanding to be taken off the heat. I give a client a blowjob and my jaw jumps out of its sockets, so I subtract the cost of treatment from my profits, hand over his $100 bills to receptionists. My jaw specialist tells me I shouldn't be giving blowjobs, and I don't ask her how else I'm supposed to pay for these appointments. Instead, I say nothing. My sore jaw clenched shut like a jar of honey, a pill bottle, the lid of a casket. I have one last poem, which is published in the anthology I edited, A Horror's Manifesto, an anthology of writing and artwork by sex workers published with Thornapple Press. I would highly encourage anyone who's interested to get it. I'm biased because I curated it and picked all the poems in it, but I still gotta say it's a great book. A lot of really wonderful voices. So yeah, this is my last poem. My sexuality moonlights as mistress, dresses up as girl next door, cloaks itself in fantasy. My sexuality has an hourly rate, charges extra for choking, only has sex with people it does not love. My sexuality looks like crisp bills in candlelight, like envelopes full of 50s tucked in underwear drawer, like pictures with my face blurred but my tits out. My sexuality smells like scented candles and stale semen, tastes like latex and lube, looks like anyone but myself. My sexuality hides behind lingerie and white wine. It says no quietly, followed by thank you, followed by sorry. My sexuality tried to fit itself into a box, but now Schrodinger is not sure if it is alive anymore. My sexuality is fisting the system, is fucking the patriarchy, is forgetting last night ever happened. My sexuality looks like memories I can't erase, and money that doesn't feel like mine, and strangers and their fucking expectations. My sexuality knows what it looks like, wants to tattoo horror on its inner lips. When you spit that word at it, we'll both know it was in its mouth first. My sexuality wears dyke like a tattoo. It sometimes lies about the meaning of, but regardless, it is always on its skin. My sexuality gets shy when trying new things, expects others to expect it to be experienced. My sexuality is experienced, and by that I mean often experiences its body not feeling like its own. My sexuality had forgotten the direction of home, but then found love, bright as North Star, found comfort in the crook of their arms, found partners that hold me after a long day at work. Don't judge me when I show them where it hurts. My sexuality used to be strictly a performance, outfit put on for the show, costume taken off when curtains close. My sexuality is reinventing its boundaries, relearning its confidence, remembering a time before it only existed as a mirror reflecting someone else's desires. My sexuality says no without saying thank you, without saying sorry. Thank you.